Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of The Sweet Spot of Life. Thank you so much for being here. If you've come back after listening to episode 1, honestly, thank you. The response to that first episode has completely blown me away. I've been so overwhelmed, in the best possible way, by the messages, the conversations, and the quiet little me too moments that have come through since it aired. I've also felt incredibly supported by my family and friends. Their encouragement to start this podcast and to keep going has meant more than I can really put into words. Putting something like this out there feels vulnerable, and knowing it's landing with people makes it feel so worthwhile. What has been the most powerful for me is realizing just how many women are carrying the same feeling. That sense that life is good, maybe even great on paper, but there's still something underneath that doesn't quite settle. Hearing that I'm not alone in that has been incredibly reassuring, and I know many of you have felt the same. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for joining me right at the beginning of this journey. There's something really special about starting something together before it's polished or perfect, and I'm so excited to walk this path alongside you. This episode is for women who look like they have it together on the outside, the ones showing up, holding it all together, doing what needs to be done, but who feel quite restless underneath. Not a dramatic unhappiness, not a crisis, just a gentle, persistent feeling that maybe something more's calling. And if that resonates with you, you're exactly where you're meant to be. I wanted to start today by sharing a little more of my story, not because it's extraordinary, but the opposite. It's quite ordinary, and I think that's exactly why so many people relate to it. I want to share how I got to this point and why I felt called to start this podcast. I had what you would call a really normal upbringing. Well, normal to me. My parents had been quite young. They were only 20 and 21. And for the first 6 years of my life, we lived with my grandparents. At the time, I didn't realize how special that was. And looking back now, I really do. Having my grandparents around 24/7 is something not many kids get anymore. And it's a period of my life I appreciate more as I get older. My parents worked incredibly hard. Sometimes they worked 2 jobs so they could save to buy their first home, and later on so they could give my sister and I opportunities. I genuinely believe my worth ethic comes from them. Even now, as they're both getting close to retirement, they're still working. My dad in particular, he's still doing night shift and long hours, and honestly, I don't know how he does it. I went to a private high school and graduated in 1998. And when I look back now, high school was actually a lot of fun. Even though at the time it felt like a drag and I couldn't wait to grow up. I'll be honest, I was probably a bit of a nightmare for my parents. I was far more interested in hanging out with my friends and obsessing over boy bands rather than studying and worrying about my OP score. Yeah, it was an OP score back then. I didn't get a great OP score and decided instead of going to university, I'd go to TAFE. Because as much as I love chasing boy bands, getting autographs signed, and singing into deodorant cans in my bedroom, I knew this probably wasn't going to turn into a career, unfortunately. That time in my life felt really light when I think back on it now. Even today, if I hear certain songs, I'm instantly transported back to those moments. Life felt simpler, easier, and full of possibility. My TAFE course did go to plan, and I dropped out after 1 semester. At the time, I decided that getting a job felt like the better option. And for the next 9 years or so, that's exactly what I did. I worked, I lived life, spent time with friends, went out, settled into a pretty standard Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 routine. In 2007, I married my husband. He really is my person in this life. And don't get me wrong, we've had our challenges. We've navigated financial stress, infertility, and mental health struggles together. But through it all, I've always known that he has my back. The kind of partnership that grounds you in ways that you don't always realize at the time. In 2013, after 5 long years of infertility struggles, we had our son. And then in 2018, we welcomed our daughter, who was our little surprise package in life. We are incredibly lucky to have our children, and yes, I know I'm biased, but they really are amazing kids. Becoming a mum changed everything, as it does, and life became fuller, louder, busier, and more demanding. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm 44 years old, almost 45, which still feels a bit wild to say out loud. I've worked in medical administration for nearly 25 years now, in all kinds of roles, from an office junior right through to my role now as a practice manager, in a very busy medical practice. I'm capable, I'm busy, I'm reliable, and I know how to hold things together. But at the beginning of last year, I started to notice this feeling creeping in, that something felt unfinished. Not wrong, just unfinished. My job is busy and demanding, and I think partly because of this feeling, I started taking on more. I'm volunteering in basketball, managing, coaching, helping behind the scenes with the basketball organisation. It's something I genuinely enjoy, and it has filled my cup to this point. It has given me purpose and connection, but even so, that feeling didn't go away. And for a long time, I tried to ignore it. I told myself, you have everything you could ever want. A family, a job, a home, good people around you. Why would you want more? There are women out there that are in unhappy relationships, women who can't find work, women struggling financially, and women who desperately want children and can't have them. Like, who do you think you are? I would literally tell myself, stop it, Yasmin. You're being so ungrateful. And after I told myself that, then came the guilt. Guilt of wanting more, when from the outside, it looked like I already had it all. I had guilt for questioning a life that I'd worked hard for and that so many people would be grateful to have. But the truth is, that quiet feeling that I had, it didn't disappear. It waited around. It lingered. And eventually I realized it wasn't there to make me feel ungrateful. It was there to get my attention. And that's what led me here. It took me over 12 months to get to that conclusion. And it wasn't one dramatic moment where I woke up and I thought, everything has to change. It was quieter than that. It was more like small moments stacking up. When I was driving home from work, sitting in traffic, thinking about it, or sitting in the driveway for a few extra minutes before going inside. I was feeling a strange mix of gratitude and restlessness at the same time. I was watching other women start businesses, change careers, create things, and feeling inspired, but also unsettled and not knowing where I should go. I kept asking myself, is this just a phase? Am I tired? Am I burnt out? But deep down, I knew it wasn't about exhaustion. It was about expansion. And that was what was confronting. Because if it's just tiredness, you could fix that with a weekend away or a holiday. If it was just stress, you can manage that. But if it's expansion, if it's growth, that asks something different of you. Not action immediately, but honesty. And that is much harder. I want to spend a little bit of time now naming this feeling because so often we carry it quietly without really knowing how to explain it. We feel it, but we don't have a language for it. So we minimize it, dismiss it, even talk ourselves out of it. And I think one of the biggest reasons women dismiss this feeling is because it doesn't look dramatic. There's no obvious crisis. Nothing has fallen apart. Life is functioning. On the outside, things are good. Sometimes even really good. And because of that, it can feel quite indulgent or unnecessary to question anything at all. So instead of getting curious, we get practical. We stay busy. We add more to our plates. Just like I added extra basketball things into my life. We tell ourselves we're tired or hormonal or just going through a phase. We assume it will pass. And sometimes we don't want to look too closely at it because we're afraid of what we might ask ourselves and what it might ask of us. This feeling also tends to show up for a lot of women in their 40s, like me. And not because something's gone wrong. If anything, it's often because so much has gone right. By this point, many of us have built the life we are working towards. We've spent years focusing on others, raising children, supporting partners, building careers, being dependable, showing up. And then one day, often quietly, we realize that we're living on momentum. Now, momentum can be a beautiful thing. It carries you through busy seasons. It helps you build stability. It keeps the wheels turning when life is full. But momentum can also keep you from moving long after you've stopped checked that the direction still feels right. You get good at your role as a mum, as a wife, as an employee, because you become the dependable one. You know what's expected of you, and you deliver. And then one day, you realize you haven't asked yourself in a long time what you want. Not what makes sense. Not what's responsible. And not what looks good on paper. But what feels aligned. And for women especially, this question can almost feel rebellious. In your 40s, there's often a shift. You've got enough life experience to know what drains you and what lights you up. You've proven that you're capable. You're not trying to become someone anymore. You are already someone, and that's really important to remember. And that is often when this question comes from, is this still what I want? That question can feel unsettling, and again, we're quick to shut it down. Because somewhere along the way, many of us have learned to confuse being unfulfilled with being ungrateful. And those two things are not the same. Being ungrateful is not appreciating what you have. However, being unfulfilled is realizing that there is more of you that hasn't been expressed yet. And that's something to really think about, the difference between being ungrateful and unfulfilled. You can deeply love your family, be thankful for your life, and still feel like something inside you is waiting. Those truths can exist at the same time. even though we are often taught as women that they can't. Society doesn't give women a lot of permission to want more once we've ticked certain boxes. Once you've built a life, raised kids, established a career, you're often expected to be content, to settle, to stop asking questions, to be grateful and quiet about it. And when you don't feel content, the message can be subtle but clear. What more could you possibly want? So we learn to downplay that inner voice. We tell ourselves it's selfish or unrealistic. Oh, it's too late. We tell ourselves that wanting more means we're dissatisfied, when really it often means we're evolving. And that is a really beautiful thing. Because this feeling isn't about dissatisfaction with your life. It's about connecting with yourself. I think sometimes we only give ourselves permission to change something when something breaks, when a relationship ends, when a job becomes unbearable, when someone forces us to reassess. But what if this isn't a crisis? What if it's just clarity knocking at your door? What if nothing is wrong? You're just ready for deeper alignment. And that feels much softer, much less dramatic, and much more empowering. Because it means you don't need to wait for disaster to give yourself permission to grow. It's the sense that there's something more to explore, more to create, more to give, more to become. Not in a way that blows everything up, but in a way that feels more aligned, more alive, and more honest. And when you finally name that feeling, not as restlessness or guilt or ingratitude, but as growth, it stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts feeling like an invitation. If you have felt this, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not behind. And you're not ungrateful. You're actually listening. And sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do. This feeling doesn't mean you need to blow up your life. It doesn't mean you need to leave your job or end your relationship or suddenly move overseas and start again. And it definitely doesn't mean that everything you've built so far has been a mistake. Acknowledging this feeling is simply the first step. And even that step doesn't require action. It just requires honesty. Allowing yourself to notice what's there without immediately judging or trying to push it away. And it is really important to say this clearly. Feeling this way does not make you ungrateful. You can appreciate your life and still feel a quiet pull to something more. Gratitude and longing can exist in the same place, even though we're often taught that it can't. This feeling doesn't mean you don't love your family. It doesn't mean you don't value your job or the life that you've worked so hard to create. It simply means that there's more inside of you that wants to be expressed. So many women feel guilty for even thinking that. We tell ourselves that wanting more somehow takes us away from what we already have, when in reality, it often comes from a deeper desire to live more fully, more honesty, and more connected to who we are now. Because the truth is, we change. We evolve. The version of you who built this life might not be the same version of you who wants to grow into what's next. And that doesn't make either version wrong. Having this feeling is often a sign of evolution. A sign that you're beginning to ask yourself, what do I want now? Not what's expected of me. Not what makes sense on paper. Not what keeps everyone else comfortable, but what feels true for me at this stage of my life. And that can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've spent years being dependable, capable, and focused on others. When you're used to meeting expectations, listening to your own inner voice that can feel unfamiliar, even a little selfish. But wanting more alignment doesn't mean wanting more things. It often means wanting more meaning, more creativity, more presence, more space to be yourself, not just who you need to be for everyone else. There is no rush here, no deadline, no pressure to have answers. You don't need to explain this feeling to anyone yet. You don't need to justify it or turn it into a plan. You're allowed to sit with it, to get curious about it, and trust that it's showing up for a reason. So if you are listening to this quietly and nodding along, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not wrong for feeling this way. This isn't a sign that something in your life is broken. It's a sign that something in you is waking up. And that's something we can meet gently and together. If I'm completely honest, starting this podcast is one of the first times in a long time I've actually done something because it felt right. Not because it's made sense financially, not because it was expected, not because I was qualified in some official way, but because that quiet voice kept saying, try this. And even recording this right now, I feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a while. That doesn't mean I'm quitting my job. It doesn't mean I figured everything out. It just means I listened. And sometimes that's enough to begin. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to invite you into a few gentle questions. There's no homework here, don't worry. No pressure to figure anything out. It's simply about awareness, about noticing what comes up when you allow yourself a quiet moment to reflect. You might like to pause this episode, or you might just let these questions sit with you as you go about your day. Now, the first question is, when do you feel most alive? Not when you're the most productive or most needed, but when you feel at most like yourself. Is it when you're with your family or at work? When you're creating something? When you're moving your body? Or when you're completely alone? Or maybe it takes you back to an earlier version of yourself. A time when life felt lighter, freer, or full of possibility. Just notice when that comes to mind. Now, the second question is about what you might have parked along the way. What dreams, ideas, or desires that have been gently pushed back while you've been busy being a wife, a mother, a leader, a support person, or simply the one who holds everything together. These don't have to be big or dramatic dreams. They might be small, quiet things that once mattered to you and that slowly got crowded out by responsibility. And finally, I want you to imagine this. if nothing changed over the next 5 years, if it was 2031 and your life looked much the same as it does now, how would you feel? Not in a judgmental way, just honestly. Would it feel comforting? Or would there be a sense of sadness, restlessness, or regret? Again, there's no right answer here, just information. You don't need to act on these thoughts. You don't need to make any decisions. Just simply noticing what comes up is enough for now. Awareness is the beginning. And we'll take everything else one step at a time. Now, in future episodes, we're going to explore this feeling more together. We'll gently pull it apart, sit with it, and hopefully find a little more clarity along the way. For you and for me. Because I really want to be honest here. I'm still figuring this out myself too. And that's part of the reason why this podcast exists. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, I would truly love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out via DMs or send a voice note if that feels easier. Your experiences and reflections and stories matter. And with your permission, I'd love to share them here because I know how powerful it is to realize that other women are feeling the same way. We do have an Instagram page, so please come along and follow along there. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. That really helps this little space grow and reach the women who might need it. And before I finish up, I want to leave you with this reminder. You're not too late and you're not broken. And you are not behind. You're exactly where you need to be in this moment. We'll figure this out together, one conversation at a time. And I'm so excited about the small, supportive community of women we are creating here. Thank you for being part of it.